Everybody, welcome back to Off the Grid Tiny House. We're on day 8 of our 50-day challenge, so if you want to know more about that, check out our intro video. We've been dealing with some massive amounts of rain the last few days, but we got some great weather back today, so we're ready to go. In our last episode, we installed the subfloor insulation, and on this episode, we're going to pressure test our plumbing system and install the subfloor. I want to talk a little bit about the floor plan for the tiny house we're building today. I lived in a trailer for almost 3 years when I solo built a 2,000 square foot house, and the floor plan worked out really well. So I used that as a rough outline and just changed the things I didn't like about it. I definitely wanted a larger kitchen with full-size appliances because I like to cook. We also wanted space for a washer-dryer combo. My wife works from home, so she needed a decent-sized desk. With tiny house design, I think it's very important to keep things as open as possible because it makes the space feel bigger. Obviously, you do want some private areas though, and that's why I kept as big a space as possible open for a combined kitchen, office, dining, relaxing area, etc. And then walled off private areas for the bathroom and bedroom. These walled off areas are actually necessary to hide plumbing vents and electrical wiring as well. This design also allows for some very useful bump outs, making room for kitchen cabinets on one end of the trailer and a master closet on the other. The bump outs get us just a little more space without paying for a longer trailer that is harder to maneuver. Many people ask why I chose not to go with a loft bed, and the reason is that if you design for a loft bed, you have to sacrifice something. Either you have a tiny house that doesn't meet Department of Transportation requirements for being under 13.5 feet in height, or you don't have enough room for sufficient insulation, or you reduce the wall height to under 8 feet. Here's some simple math to show my point. The first 2 feet of the maximum 13.5 feet allowed by the Department of Transportation for vehicles is made up of the wheels and axles. As I mentioned in episode 3, you could put the plumbing under the frame of the trailer, but it would be very difficult to properly air seal the floor and would allow an access point for insects and rodents, as well as leave open the pipes to being damaged. The next 10 inches or so is subfloor. This allows for insulation and plumbing. You could go less, but then you're not going to have sufficient insulation and you'll have a colder house. The next 8 feet is made up of the walls. You should really have at least a 1/12 slope on your roof to prevent water damage issues. That means 8 inches for roof slope. You should have at least another 6 inches for insulation. Add that up and you're left with 1.5 feet for a loft. Talk about claustrophobic. Let's take a quick overview of what we hope to accomplish today. The subfloor is the base of the house, and we want to make sure we install it so it's solid and flat. I'll start by cutting and drilling the subfloor plywood to make room for the plumbing stub outs and vents. This is a great time to double check that they're coming up in just the right spots. However, before we nail the subfloor down, I'm going to fill the wastewater plumbing with water and check for leaks. Once I'm sure that everything is leak-free and in the right place, I'll glue and nail the subfloor plywood to the top of the joist. Cutting and drilling the subfloor is not any different than cutting and drilling the joist. You use the same size hole saws. I measured from the edge of the joist to each stub out, both from the front and the sides, and then I was able to transfer those measurements to the plywood, much like I did with the anchor bolts on the sill plates. I used the marks to make a square and then drilled my hole for the stub out right in the middle. Again, like with the anchor bolts, perfection isn't necessary. If your hole is a little too big, you will never see it. Once the plywood is in place over the plumbing, it's a lot easier to make sure that the stub outs are coming up in the right place. Remember, most stub outs will need to come up inside the walls of the tiny house. The exceptions are toilets and showers. Filling the plumbing system with water to check for leaks is very smart to do before we cover the floor. If there is a leak and we don't catch it now, we will have to either cut a hole in the subfloor or in our flashing to fix it. I don't want to have to do either of these, so I'm going to check the plumbing system before I nail the subfloor down. To test the wastewater pipes, you glue test caps to all of the stub outs and vents except for one. You also cap the waste outlet. Then you fill the one remaining uncapped pipe with water. Building codes require you to test the plumbing system with 10 feet of water, so even though we aren't required to adhere to building codes with a tiny house, we're going to follow them whenever possible. This simply means that the uncapped pipe should be at least 10 feet above the outlet pipe. Once the entire system is filled with water, it will start dribbling out of the uncapped pipe. At this time, I filled an uncapped water bottle halfway and turned it upside down over the uncapped pipe and marked the height of the water with a Sharpie. If you come back a few hours later and the water is lower than the line, you know you have a leak. The water supply lines can also be filled with water and checked, but I've used this PEX many times and never had a problem, knock on wood, so I'm going to just check the entire system later in the build. Hey guys, I spend my time and money making these videos for you because I want to give you the confidence and knowledge for you to build your own tiny house. In return, I'd really appreciate it if you could pause this video, hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and visit our Patreon page. Your support ensures that you'll see more awesome videos like this one. If you do start building your own tiny house, you can use the links in the description below to purchase your tools and supplies, and that also helps out the channel. Once I was satisfied that there were no leaks and the plumbing was all in the right spots, I was ready to glue and nail the subfloor. I used Loctite Subfloor Adhesive, which is a popular brand and has provided me with plenty of squeak-free floors in the past. I laid down a generous bead of adhesive over the top of every joist and then laid the plywood down in place. Adhesive helps to fill the tiny natural cracks and crevices between the plywood and the joists. Being made from trees, they will have some comings and goings. You want to lay the subfloor down at an angle so you can make sure the tongue of the plywood fits into the groove of the previous sheet. I took a couple minutes to make sure the sheet was in just the right place and then used some 8D ring shank nails to attach it to the joist. Ring shank nails are made specifically to hold in place and not back out of the plywood. Many times when you hear squeaks on a floor, it's because the subfloor is riding up and down the shaft of a nail. This will occur less often when using adhesive and ring shank nails. Building codes require you to nail every 6 inches around the outside of each sheet and every 12 inches in the middle of the sheet. The sheets are 4 feet wide and there are joists every 2 feet, so there's a joist that runs down the middle of each sheet. I just nailed it off every 6 inches everywhere, but for the joist that runs down the middle of the sheet, building codes only require a nail every 12 inches. Every episode I want to take some time and talk about some of the mistakes I made, setbacks I had. And in this episode, you'll remember that I use strings to measure for the plumbing. I stretched some strings between the joists, and that kind of marked out where I needed the plumbing to come up because it has to come up exactly right in between the walls. And I was a little bit off when I installed the subfloor. Then I was able to get a more accurate, instead of 2 strings crossing, I was able to see exactly where it should come up on the subfloor. And I noticed I was a little bit off. So today's mistake of the day, we're an inch off on the walls right here. Because we're using a pre-made shower enclosure, that wall has to be right there. That means there's a doorway, so that means this wall has to be in the same spot. And when we measured, we're an inch off. So this plumbing stub out, which is for the sink, the bathroom sink, it needs to come up between this wall, and we're just an inch off. So what we could do is use a couple of these and get it back in there. And you would never see this because the the bathroom sink is going to be up against the wall here. So you'd never know it, but it would be a kind of a pain to work around. The much easier thing to do, since we haven't nailed anything in yet, is just put a little coupling in here and move it down just a little bit. Luckily, I had checked that before I nailed down the subfloor, and I was able to just lift it up and cut the pipe, install a little longer pipe, and glue it back together, and we were back on track. But, just little things, checking things twice, making sure it's right. If I had installed the subfloor though, I could have just cut it out and done the same thing and then glued another piece back in there. So, things are going to happen and you're going to make mistakes and you just got to take care of them and move on. It's not a big deal. In our next episode, we'll be framing and raising the walls of the tiny house. People are always so impressed by walls going up, but it's actually one of the quicker and easier parts of the build. I hope you can all join me in our next episode as I show you how to quickly and easily build the walls of our off-the-grid tiny house.